Good morning, everybody. I'm Liam Mullins, for those who don't know me from the Seven Stars. And on behalf of Media for All, I'd like to welcome you all to the second Me for Matters. So Media for All was founded in 2018 by Naren and is made up of Bame role models in the advertising industry. Our focus is how we can recruit, retain, and how we can help individuals from Bame communities to rise within advertising. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but there's a really good article this weekend in the Huffington Post which talks about a lot of the positive action that's taken place as a result of the Black Lives Matter protests. Changes in the US to police funding and accountability, some statues being removed that were kind of, signposting to racist people that we absolutely shouldn't have up. And also some of the tech platforms are starting to make some positive changes and positive movements to, some of the issues around misinformation and political messages. So there's things happening. We know there's not enough, but it is a start. And our job is to keep that moving. So this platform was one of the ways Media for All was trying to help. We believe that part of our role is bringing conversation and education to the table, which is why the webinar was born. It's about giving people a forum to ask difficult or awkward questions and help ensure that everyone has the right language and vocabulary to have the conversations that we need to move this forward. So last week we ended up thinking we'd talk for half an hour, we talked for a lot longer than that. And a lot of the things that were coming up has led to the topic for today. And today's topic is about how we talk about race at work. And we mentioned last week that me personally as a mixed race person, I definitely don't always get it right. And I worry about, am I using the right language or saying the right thing? So, we're going to talk about today, what's the right language people should use to speak up and call out racism? How do people do it? Are labels a bit lazy? Is it a bit shorthand? Is it a way that generalises whole communities? But the one thing that we do know, language is a bit of a barrier for people in engaging in a conversation. So we're going to try and unravel all of that in half an hour. And we've got a brilliant panel that are going to help us do that. So as well as some Me for role models, we've also got the awesome Kathryn Jacob today. And as well as having an OBA, I need to take a deep breath here, Kathryn. Kathryn's also CEO of Pearl & Dean, co-author of the brilliant book, The Glass Wall, which I haven't read, but I definitely should. Heavily involved in Speak of School and has recently been appointed as chair of Cross-Industry Inclusion Group with their new campaign about UK advertising needs you. So it sounds like you've really got your hands full with homeschooling and everything else, Kathryn. So thank you for taking your time to join us today. We've also got Naren Patel, who was the ex-CEO of PrimeSite, and not only was Naren the godfather of the outdoor industry, he was also the founding father of MIFA. So it's really, really good that Naren can join us this week. Sups joined us last week, and she's commercial director at ForwardPMX, and also dedicates Sups a load of her time on academies as one of their trustees. Mihir is the awesome head of broadcast at Equally Awesome Total Media. And then Mihir is also Media Week's Rising Star of the Year, which I know you're holding on to that title as long as you can, Mihir, right? So welcome to the team today. And finally, Colette. Colette, we had some great chats last week, so thanks for joining again. Colette runs award-winning brand and strategy consultancy for social change, Brand by Me. So thank you very much, everyone, for taking your time. These are going to happen every single week, Tuesday at midday. Please keep registering. Please keep signing up. If you've got any questions as we're going through, pop them in the Q&A. You're more than welcome to do that anonymously. We want this to be a real open forum, so you're welcome to do that. Equally, feel free to pop your questions in with your name and we'll give you a call out. And what we'll do is we're going through, we'll bring those questions to the table or we'll come back and answer them at the end. I'm sure, I know that all the panellists have a bit more time after 12:30, so we can do that. So I think that's just about enough for me. Today's big question is about how we talk about race at work. And starting with Kathryn, can you tell us a little bit more, Kathryn, about your new role as chair of the Inclusivity Group? But more importantly, I guess, what do you think companies should be doing to help their people speak up against racism in all its forms?
Well, thank you, Liam. So the committee that I'm part of has got the Ad Association on it, the IPA, ISBAR, Jerry Dakin, Sarah Jenkins from Saatchi & Saatchi, Channel 4, and Naren is also part of the wider family as well. And fundamentally, this is a reaction to the fact that if you look at the IPA statistics, and there's no statistics in media owners, there's no statistics in brands, our representation of race is lamentable in our industry. And I think a lot of it comes from people doing things in isolation that they don't know that works, people not knowing what works, people having a view which is, oh my God, it's really difficult and how are we going to do it? And so what we've started off is UK Advertising Needs You as a hub. And what we want people to do is share best practice. So stuff that's worked for them, it's actually sometimes stuff that hasn't worked for them, And it's a tool for people to get into our industry and progress in our industry and stay in our industry and have the careers that they deserve, no matter, you know, what group that you identify with, because it's really, really difficult. You know, if you run a business and you're trying to invent a kind of a apprenticeship program from the start, or you're trying to measure how you're doing against the industry, it's just really difficult. So I want to onto this hub of knowledge, you know, informed knowledge that then people can use and can understand what's going on. And so if anybody's got any contributions, talk to the lovely Sharon Lloyd-Barnes at the Ad Association. But we're just trying to do that. And that's the start, because it's a big and intractable issue, and we just need to do more.
Thanks, Kathryn. I think that's fantastic. I totally agree with you. You know, all of those guys coming together is how we're going to make movement. People working collaboratively is going to drive that change. Mihir, if I come to you with a similar question, you know, what do you think, either at Total or, you know, in general, what do you think companies should be doing to speak up against racism? How do you go about having that conversation in the first place?
Yeah, so I think as a first step, obviously there's been a lot of talk about the publication that went out, the letter to Adland. And I think if any company has signed that letter, then automatically they're empowering their employees to talk up about racism, and they're opening up that forum for conversation. But I think that has to happen it has to be a two-way relationship. So companies have to talk to their employees about race and about racism and all diversity issues, for then in turn for employees to feel comfortable about raising these issues. Because I think also employers acknowledging that they're not quite there yet, and there's a lot of work to do, showing a degree of vulnerability in the companies itself also opens up a forum for people to raise issues and raise times that they may have been subject to racism or any form of discrimination. And I think the other key thing, and the really, really key thing actually, is that every single complaint should be taken seriously, every single one. And until they are, then if complaints aren't taken seriously, then people will be less likely to speak up going forward. If they're taken seriously from day one, then people will be more forthcoming with anything that they've experienced in the workplace.
Great, thanks, Mihir. And I think what we'll get on to talk about shortly is about, okay, well, what do you say? How do you have that conversation? Because I guess if you're a junior person in an ad agency somewhere, they're not sure how to raise a flag, or they're worried about what it means. So I think we'll try and get into a bit of that chat as we go through. Colette, tell us a bit about your experience of this, and what do you think companies right now need to be doing in that space?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I endorse both of what Kathryn and Mihir said in terms of the importance of sharing best practice is absolutely key. The recognition that people haven't got it right, but Mihir said kind of, you know, that sort of zero tolerance approach, like this needs to be taken seriously. We can't continue to apologize for this, make excuses. No, I don't think it's racism, because that just needs to go. Because as Mihir said, it really does dial down the, you know, it kind of minimizes the debate. For me, I think there's a couple of other things. Well, there's loads, but there's a couple that I'll pick out. The first one is creating safe spaces for people to share their experience, a lived experience of racism in the organisation, past and present. There's also helping people kind of move from a sort of I'm not racist to actually being anti-racism, and helping all kind of employees go on the journey of what racism actually looks like. Not the very, because I think too often people think it's just about, you know, hurling racial slurs in the workplace. Now, obviously, I think we can all agree that shouldn't happen. It does happen, but it's not just, that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are any number of behaviours. And so there's a real need to kind of, I guess, move the conversation all so people recognise what racism is, so they can then start, and leaders also recognise what it is, so that when people are coming to them, they're not saying, oh no, that's not racism, because. And I think the final one for me is and I love what Mihir said about the two-way. And I think so if we're creating safe spaces for people to share lived experiences, and that being ongoing, not just now at this time, one town hall, then we're done, but ongoing, that sort of dialogue. We also need to create a space where leaders can receive and listen and hear what's going on, and that to be a constant too. And so I think that's where I come to in terms of what companies need to do, learn from best practice, really take it seriously, as Mihir said, create safe spaces for people to share experiences, and they need to be proper safe spaces, educate everybody on what actual racism, being anti-racist really looks like, and then create this kind of, I love what Mihir said, the two-way dialogue, so really making sure if we're listening, we're also going back and taking action on that.
Thanks, Colette. I think what we're getting loud and clear is we know that companies are not there yet. It's absolutely now's the time to put your hand up, say where you are, but that's not okay on its own. You've got to then take action. You've got to be vocal, and you've got to create platforms and areas that people can have that debate. I think that's fundamental to.
And I think coming back to, sorry, and I will just shut up then, but coming back to the point around like the tough language. So I had, I'm working with a client at the moment on looking at kind of the brand and how they can use their brand to create an engine around change around this stuff. And the client said something really powerful to me. He said, you know what we're looking to do with this project, we need to tackle the impact of white supremacy in and out. And my client is white. So by using that strong language, before we've veered away from it, we can't use it. But by using that and calling it out as it is, I think is a really powerful statement to the organisation too. Non-judgmental. He just said it as it is. This is what we need to do. And it means that people kind of wake up and take it seriously, which I think is really important, rather than trying to soften it or, apologise for it, which I think sometimes is often the case.
Cheers, Colette. Naren, I'm going to come to you, and I guess the question I'm going to slightly change, because I remember your team presenting their agency sales team of the year to us as a group of judges, and I remember thinking that day is, one of the only organisations there that had a much more diverse team across all areas. What do you think? What did you put in place, and when was it that you sort of realised that you needed to move the dial forward in terms of what you did at that place?
Listen, I think first of all, it's fair to say we weren't perfect. Our stats never matched, the London stats. But I think because I was in prime site, maybe there was people in there that came and said, right, the CEO is, Asian. All right, we've got a chance here. I think the issue is, right, all companies take racial discrimination really seriously, right? Because if you go to court and lose, the sums awarded are uncapped, right? So everyone has grievance policies that they publish, right? And if you do anything naughty, the problem is around, first of all, if people complain, what generally happens, they may not be protected by the organization. Right, so you make a complaint, all of a sudden the other person complaining. So I think companies need to work harder on that area. So that's the big thing. The other issue is if managers are, making the odd racist joke or the odd racist comment and aren't getting picked up, actually the policy is basically saying, no one bothers about this, so just continue. So you've got unintended consequences of bad behavior. And kind of what the research says is actually a lot of stuff that Mihir was saying is if you had open discussions and open dialogues, and if somebody said something, really bad, absolutely kind of take him to town. But I think having open conversations on language within businesses and making some of these less formal probably will help the conversation. Because I believe most people are good. Yes, in every organization there's the odd bad apple, and what we need is a conversation, and what we need is kind of education with people, because everyone's got grievance policies. So just saying we've got a grievance policy, we're going to stand by it. It's kind of just not enough, and it hasn't worked, fundamentally.
Cheers, Naren. I think everybody's given a really great view on kind of that top down, what should business and what should organisations do. I guess, Supes, if we go to you next, what would be really good to understand is if you are, new in the industry, or you're not in top, I hate this phrase, senior leadership or whatever terrible, business language we use, what would you do if you witness something or you experience it, and how should people be calling these things out without that kind of fear?
I think one of the things that we've been looking at as a business is actually enabling people to do just that. So we've, a light's been shone on it. We have now realised that we don't really have policies and protocols and processes in place to enable our teams to feel safe and secure. So safeguarding has become a really big piece for us within the business, and it's quite a shame that we didn't pick up on it earlier. But I think it's everyone's business to call it out. It's not just the individual that is subjected to it, but it's everybody and anybody that is witness to it should be supportive and calling out bad behaviour and racist behaviour. And it doesn't just extend to within your teams, it extends to the partners and the clients that you work with. And that's become a big focus for me in particular, is safeguarding our teams, not just within our four walls, but when we send them out to client meetings and to meet with partners and to all of that, is how do we put a process and protocol in place to ensure that they can raise any issue. And then, as Mihir and Colette mentioned, zero tolerance, that dialogue with our teams to ensure that they understand that this is our stance and this is exactly what we will do in the event that an issue is raised. I think the other thing is an ally. Allyship is really, really important, and ensuring that our teams understand that by raising a concern on behalf of somebody or supporting someone who is subjected to such behaviours will not reflect badly on them. In fact, it's a really positive thing to do, and really get that message out. So I think no matter what level you are, if you going back to your question, if you see or hear of any of this sort of behaviour, it's your duty to call it out. And I think we need to make it really clear to our teams and our people that that's exactly what we expect of them, even if there isn't process and protocol in place. If you don't tell us this is what's happening within the business, we will be none the wiser. And yes, we should be putting these policies and processes in place without the need for those situations to arise. But if they do arise, we definitely need to know about them, and they need to be raised.
No, that's brilliant, Sups. And I think, you've got 500 different people signing that open industry letter now. I think that is the license to go, we're open, we want to talk about it, we put our hands up. And I think if we don't hold these organisations to account by stepping forward as well, I think that could be an empty promise. Mihir, as a rising star, 30 under 30, young buck kind of coming up, tell us how, have you experienced it? Have you, what would you have done, or how would you tackle that sort of situation?
Yeah, I think it is really difficult, and it's for anyone to kind of pick up the conversation. I think from a young talent perspective, the whole thinking could be with any form of discrimination, and particularly racism. Oh, if I speak up, then I'm going to have kind of a black mark against me, and it may affect pay rises or promotion opportunities and all those sorts of things. The first thing I'll say to anyone that's thinking that is, any form of discrimination should not be a black mark against a person that has been discriminated. Like, it absolutely shouldn't be. And if you feel that it is, then perhaps you're not working in the right place, is the first thing that I would say. And maybe you're going to have to kind of do your talking by moving your feet and leaving the organisation. Be in an organisation that really kind of supports you. But also, I think Sups made a really important point about having kind of allies. And this also, so Sups are talking about it from an ally perspective of people talking up if they've heard of other issues. But I also think if you've been discriminated against and it's by someone kind of more senior than you, that you're a bit scared to then go to your HR team or go directly back to that person saying they're being inappropriate, go and speak to an ally, someone that you really trust within your organisation, that has your best interests at heart, but also the kind of is a good reflection of how the company acts, and go and speak to them about these issues and how you felt, and maybe bring them into the conversation. The other thing I'd say is, understandably, any conversation about racism is highly emotive. So perhaps putting things in emails is not the best idea. Maybe realistically having face-to-face conversations with your HR department or your ally is a better way to go than writing things down in an email. But yeah, I completely kind of understand that it can be a difficult conversation to have. but just use the people around you that you know are going to have your best interests at heart, and don't worry about being a black mark on you.
Thanks, Mihir. And look, guys, another action I'd say take, if you're sitting there not sure what to say or do or how to engage it, if you go onto the Media for All website, there's a load of mentors there and people that you can reach out to, people's Twitter handles there, people's LinkedIn's there. The reason it's there is we want you guys to contact us. We won't always have the 100% right answer. We can give you our view of what our business would do. But no, thanks a lot, Mihir. Kathryn, I think one of the things that we hear is, oh, well, that was just banter, whether that's around people's sexuality or whether it's around, you know, race, whatever it might be. I mean, banter, I believe, doesn't really have a place in the workplace. It's probably, everyone who knows me will be raising their eyebrows on that sentiment. But I think, how do you tackle that? How do you, you know, how do we deal with that kind of, it was only banter BS?
Yeah, I think you're right. It is BS, and I think it's often used as a way of kind of bringing people down, but not in a, oh, you know, we were in the pub and I just said this and I didn't mean it, and Liam had the wrong thing, and da da da. And it is the point. It's to Sup's point about allies, and it's about knowing. It's about companies setting a culture, and individuals knowing they work in a culture which is turning around and saying, "I'm sorry, do you realise how rude that is?" If you turn around and say that to people, you know, one of the ways that, you know, we teach, when Sue and I do talks about the glass wall, is to get young women to say, "I'm sorry, I know you well enough to know that you'd never say that willingly, would you? You've obviously just misspoken, or you didn't quite understand the effect that had on me." Because no one, if they're indulging in banter, is ever going to admit that actually I meant to be, you know, in front of people in the pub, yeah, actually I meant to be really offensive. They'll just go, "Oh yeah, you know, it's really funny, isn't it?" Even though no one's laughing. And you've just got to know that people have got your back. So what we do is, you know, set it. I think one of the things is if you're in the pub and someone says something, you know, you've got someone with you, and both of you can turn around and go, you know, "Did you realise how rude that sounds?" And it doesn't have to be, "I can't," you know, and it is your point, Mihir, about it's about nuance. And also if it is someone who's got form, write it down, you know, write down when it happened, write down what they said. And it may not be an HR issue. It may just be that that person doesn't understand what they're saying. You know, they don't understand the effect of what they're saying, and because they think it's funny, or they think it's to put you at your ease, you know, and it isn't. It's clumsy and it's inappropriate. But it is that whole thing about how we have to educate people to treat people as individuals. You know, it's an interesting thing. I was talking to someone who said that post the Black Lives Matter thing, one of my very close friends works at an investment bank, and she said one of her black colleagues said, "God, I wish people had stopped bloody asking me how I am. I'm sick to the sodding back teeth of it." And then she said she spoke to another colleague who said, "Why is no one asking how I am? You know, don't they care?" And it is just this thing where if you feel that you want support, or you want something recognized, just go to a senior person. It might not be your manager, it might be someone who you have a really great relationship, and just go, "Look, this is how I'm feeling. Can you help me? Can you help me talk this through and help me negotiate this situation?" Because no one, you know, given how precious talent is, going to turn around and go, "No, I'm really sorry you're feeling uncomfortable, but crack on, it's not our problem." They will. It's just that, you know, and I can say this as a, you know, white middle-aged woman. Sometimes I don't know what to say. I need you to help me to talk to you in the most appropriate way.
Yeah.
You know, and I have that even just with blokes, and they're the other 50% of the population, that I sometimes don't know. I find it hard sometimes to talk to men in difficult situations because they've got a front up, and I know that something's bothering them, but trying to get people to talk about their feelings, and you've got to have a culture where people can go, "I know that was inadvertent, but this is how it made me feel."
Thanks for that, Kathryn. I think that's spot on. Colette, I think you had a point you just wanted to add on to that as well, in terms of, you know, what sort of language, how do we educate, that sort of piece.
Yeah, I think so. I think so we've said, I think there's a kind of maybe an assumption here that we've said you need to call it out, there's an assumption that people know how and when to do that. And this actually was a comment by Sal, thank you, that came into our panelists to say that actually, if we want calling out to be the norm, and we do, we need to educate people on how and when and how to do it. We need to share our experiences openly, but also, to Kathryn's point, I think we need to, and when I say we, I'm going to come on to the we, because I think there's a we that it shouldn't be. But there needs to be education about what is and isn't appropriate. And then once that's done, it's saying to people that is absolutely inappropriate, loud and clear and publicly inappropriate, and just shutting that sort of the talk down. No nervous laughs. No, I didn't know what to say. Just inappropriate is, I mean, it's one of my favorite words ever. I use it quite a lot in this scenario because it's immediately, it's not judgmental, because it is inappropriate in the workplace. And you can, by calling it out, it helps this. But I think when I said we need to educate, I think too often the onus is put on the people affected to educate and communicate people. And I think that's really unfair. So I think there has to be a way of, for organizations to, there are lots of resources out there for organizations to provide and link people to those resources, and people to take some ownership for educating themselves. And then also for maybe there to be programs of that then shared across the wider organisation. So I know Sky, for example, have had a whole thing around allyship training across their organisation for pretty much everybody, to make sure everyone is in the space where we know how to speak out, how to call out, how, as Sup said, to support, and what we will no longer tolerate. And just making that very available is going to be absolutely key, because we're saying, yeah, we must call it out, we need to make it the norm, but we've got to help people do it. Yeah. And that can't be on the people affected.
Yeah, do you know what, Claire? I couldn't agree more with that. And I guess our last big question we had today, and then we'll try and answer some questions, is the topic of, and I don't want to use the word label, the question of terminology. And this is something that I find massively personal. Everyone will have their own view. Some people are okay with being called black. Some people want to be called Bame. Some people want to be called. So I'm going to ask, I think the best way to kind of get into the heart of this question is, and Kathryn, even yourself, as you say, as a white middle-aged lady, I'm going to ask everybody here, how do you want to be called? What do you want to be? What do you want people to refer to you as? And I think that is a big question, because sometimes it stops people having the right conversations. People are nervous. People are worried about upsetting. What do we want to scold? And Sups, I'm going to start with you on that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I think it's a really difficult one, right? Because there's many ways in which you can identify somebody. And you don't always have to refer to their colour. You could talk about the fact that I'm the short girl with the dark brown hair, and I've got the yellow dress on. I think the labels are given when you want to talk about somebody or refer to somebody. And when it comes down to race, I think the biggest problem with race is it's a social construct. Okay, it's a way in which society has created race, in a way in which to define the relationships, and it's a relationship of domination and subordination. So I would never want to be called Bame. I would never want to be called BME, because it's a collective label. You could call me a person of colour, you could call me the brown girl, but I think there's so many other ways in which you could talk about somebody without having to bring colour into it. Or rather the colour of their skin into it. There's so many other ways. So I think in relationship to that question, I think there's loads of ways in which we can describe me.
Thanks, Sups. Going to the poster god, Naren, what's your view on that?
So I think it's a really tricky one. I'm mixed race, like you, Liam. I look more Indian than I look white. But I think Sups raised some really good points. Regardless, however, there will come a time when you need to identify someone, like you might be going, oh, that's that person in the bar on the left-hand side. And I think the only way you can get to that is by, again, talking to people, speaking to, black people, Asian people, Chinese people, and trying to get an understanding of how they like to be referred to. I thought the Matt Hancock thing where he was talking about BAME, Bame people in the cabinet was it just upset everyone in there really, because it's just the wrong term. But I don't think there's a right answer, but I just think each person needs to do the work, have those conversations. Even I think companies should do it, do it in a group and ask people, how do you like to be, if I had to use, your race to describe you, how would you like it? What would you like to be called? So I think, because I don't think there is a right or wrong, but it's also quite individual.
Yeah, it's really quite a personal thing, I believe, and it's interesting because we've had lots of questions coming through saying thanks everybody for sharing your questions and your thoughts. It's brilliant. About how do you tactfully kind of ask someone that, what should I call you, or how do you tactfully ask if people are doing all right, and how, because it is so personal. And I guess my view is there's an element of authenticity. Is if you're always coming from an authentic place, then there's no wrong question to ask. It's only a wrong assumption, right? So, Kathryn, in your view, and sorry, I just noticed you had a drink of your tea there, bad timing on my part. What's your opinion on that sort of topic?
Hang on, let me swallow my tea.
Sorry.
My view about it is that we are individuals. I just want to be seen as an individual, and I don't want to be put into a box. And so I think it's right. I think we have to say to people, how do you want us to handle this? What do you want us to do? You tell us, because all too often, so many of these policies come from a top-down, this is what we're going to do, and doesn't actually recognize what the people in the company want to do. And I've got into trouble with this before, but I genuinely think that around lots of issues, HR policies should be shaped by the people that they affect, not by law or a tick box culture or just feeling that, it's a risk minimization. I think we have to turn around and say to people, do you want to call, are you are you the cheeky one who always laughs at the inappropriate moment? Naren, I know you're the one who really that bloke who really likes red wine. Isn't that a great thing to be called, rather than be defined by your race or your age or what have you? And I think what we've got to do is see work as a collection of individuals who bring all of their talent to work. And the most important thing is they feel that they belong there, that they've got a voice. And it doesn't matter whether you're, whatever race, creed, colour, sexuality, religion, whatever, that is where you do your best work, because you're supported by similar individuals. And it is the mix of those people that makes your organisation great. And we all need to recognise that sometimes on a Tuesday, so-and-so's a bit grumpy because, or what have you, and you just accommodate that. And we've got to move away from this one-size-fits-all robotic attitude, which is, well, you either fit in or you bugger off, because this is the way we are. Because it's not reflective of the true diversity of both personality and upbringing, what have you, that we should have within our industry.
Yeah. Otherwise, nothing will ever change, right? We'll all be looking at the same faces that it's been like for the last 15 years. So I agree. It has to change. Thank you, Kathryn. Mihir, give us your, I'm conscious we've probably got 10 minutes and we've got quite a lot of questions, but give us your view, my friend, on exactly that topic.
So, a lot's been said by Kathryn, Naren and Supriya already on kind of the terminology and things like that. What I would say is that, as everyone said, it's kind of hard to decide what the right terminology to use is, but we definitely should be aware of what the wrong terminology is. And I'd like to hope that most people kind of are. In terms of Bame itself as a term, it's essentially a term of convenience, and one that was used for a lot of kind of statistical and data purposes, really. And actually, that's quite dangerous. As Naren said, Matt Hancock's interview a couple of weeks ago on Sky News was a prime example of how damaging that can be if used in the wrong way. But there are powers to using terms, collective terms as well. However, as I'll just kind of add to what Naren, Kathryn and Supriya said, is that we have to listen to people and understand what they want to be identified by, whether that is their colour, their race, or whether it is an interest they have, loving red wine or loving a certain football team or whatever it is. I think we just need to be better at listening to people and doing what people really want to be known for, I guess.
Cool. No, thanks, Mihir. I think you're right. A lot of what everyone's saying is chiming together, and I think it's like, knowing what's not right and asking questions to make sure you're talking to people how they want to be talked to. Colette, well, I always finish with you because you'll give us an impassioned, punchy answer.
No pressure there then. I won't repeat what everyone said, because I think everyone's right. The only addition I would make is that I think there's a fundamental difference in using a term to bring people together and share shared experiences. So whether that's, I'm a Black woman, I'm really proud of being a Black woman. When I talk to other Black women, we say as Black women together, and there's something about us collectively. If someone said to me, "You Black woman," I'd be like, that's not how I'd like to be addressed. Thank you very much. That's not appropriate. So I think there is something about the terms we use for ourselves to bring ourselves together. It's the same. So I am on a Facebook group for people of colour in creative industries. Again, we will use the term people of colour because there are shared experiences, but within that group, we also highlight when there are differences, between, different ethnicities. But again, that's a collective group we use to explore shared experiences and come together as a collective so we can collectively support each other. That's a different thing. And I think that's completely different. Apart from that, everything else that everyone said about labels, they are not useful. It's not appropriate to lump people under one umbrella and say, oh, we just need one then because of all this huge group. It's not appropriate. And fundamentally, as Mihir said, we should be listening to people about what they want to be called, not, and I think there is something about that listening. So I shared a story where there are some very archaic words we just shouldn't use. Yet people persist in using them because they're not listening when people are saying this is really offensive. Just don't listen and persist. I don't see why it's offensive. It's not an answer. Actually, you need to listen. When someone says to you, do not call me that, or don't say that word anymore, listen, accept it. Not, oh, it's PC gone mad. These things are just unhelpful. So I think actually that listening and acting on it is really important.
Great, thanks, Colette. Guys, we're slowly getting out of time today. So what we'll do, thanks to the fantastic panelists for agreeing to stay on for another 5 minutes, we're going to try and answer some of your questions. And just so that everyone knows, what we did to get to our topic this week is we looked at all the questions that came in, and that helped us form where we got to for this week. So we've got a bit of a roadmap of what we're going to get into next Tuesday, but we'll definitely take into account all the questions that we've had through. So if we haven't answered your specific question, don't worry, we'll definitely come to that at some point. But I am going to start off with, mainly because he's on my screen, Naren, I've got a question for you. We've had a couple of people ask about different sizes of organisations, to big, multinational media agencies, to smaller independents that might have less than 10 people. Is the advice different? What do you need to flex or change? And you've run businesses of different sizes yourself. And how do you think people should behave versus, size of company?
So I think smaller organisations are generally a reflection of the owner or the founder. So the culture of that business, the values of that business will reflect the owner. And I think that's good and that's bad, right? And that all depends on the leader. And all I can say is kind of just repeat what Mihir said. If you're in a place where it's a smaller agency and the founder's values don't match your own, get the CV ready and start looking, because you're not going to change it. It's really, really difficult. And you could have those lovely conversations about that was really hurtful, but I worry about, the difficulty of that. I think larger organizations where you have, good training, good structures, more people, possibility of allies, and I think you've got good leaders. I think, I always say, worst comes to worst, right to the top. Yeah. If something's not getting sorted, I'd always give it a go, but I'd always say go to the top, because you'll get, especially now,
yeah.
I think you'd have got it before anyway, but I think especially now you'll get a reaction, really.
Cheers, Naren. We've had a couple of questions come through about, how do all these people have put their hands up and said, yeah, we commit to this, but how do we, keep the continuous action and momentum going forward. And I guess it's something that we've been thinking about as Media for All, and around, you know, if our 3 pillars are rise, retain and recruit, what percentage of people, non-white people, are coming into your organisation? Who was the last person to get a promotion in that organisation? And also, what's your churn rate? So I also think there's ways that we can start to, I'm not saying traffic light feels a bit too much of a blunt tool, but there's ways we can start traffic light progress to help communicate to the wider industry how businesses and organisations are doing. And that's definitely something we're going to get into in the next session. I've got a question. Kathryn, this is probably going to be one for you, but the rest of the team, feel free to jump in and definitely do. But starting with Kathryn, we've had a question in from Lydia, and she asks, as an industry that's responsible for, you know, advertising communications, how do we deal with spending our clients' money on businesses who might not necessarily be in line with where we currently are being? So things like stop funding hate. I've got lots of close friends down at the Mail, but that as an organisation isn't doing fantastically in that space. And without specifically talking to the Mail guys, what's our role as advertisers and marketeers to make sure that we're working in a way that's definitely in the right space?
I think it's an education process. I think what we have to do is realise that where we place our money enables certain platforms to thrive, and that we've got to talk to our clients and say, is this where you want to appear? Is this what you want to do? Is this true to your values? And is it really what you want to do? It's interesting. There's a one of the things that we're thinking about at the all industry group is, should we be measuring how many people of you know, different diversities are in front of the camera when we're doing ads and behind the camera as well? Should we be doing that? Should we be thinking about that as an action? Because so much of what we do, if you look at how many ad messages people get, if you're not seeing a reflection of the society we live in, you're just seeing one view. We've got to change that, because otherwise it just normalizes just some kind of homogenous view of the way that our society is, and it's not right. And interestingly, the Ad Association did a thing called The Whole Picture. They did some research, Credos did. And there was an Indian woman in one of the groups that we did that, and she said, every time an Indian woman is in ad, I'm either in a sari or I'm a pharmacist. That's it. That's the only, I'm in a sari next to an elephant, or I'm a sodding pharmacist. So I can't be a CEO, or I can't be, you know, et cetera, et cetera. And it's completely right. We've got to challenge lazy thinking, and we've got to turn around and by educating our clients, our advertisers, they're the ones that if they withdraw their money, you'll find that policies will change. And it is that thing about, you are, you know, if you're in an ad agency or a creative agency, you are their trusted advisor, and you need to put your hand up and go, really? You know, if it then turned out that there was a front page on the Mail that you'd put an ad next to something completely inappropriate and damaging, how would you feel about that? Being the CMO standing up in front of the board and going, whoops, sorry. And that's the thing. It's our job as trusted advisors to turn around and go, no.
I love that. Colette, I can see you nodding your head vigorously. That's normally a good nudge for me. That's all I need to let us know your view on that.
I agree with Kathryn completely, especially I used to be assistant director of comms at Bernardo's, the children's charity. And we had to be so careful about this in terms of looking at how we represent diversity, but also it's really tough. I was the lead client. I'm a black woman. Sometimes I'd be the only lone voice, and I have to really shout at people to get them to, you know, listen and take this on board. It's way easier if we're making sure that we've got, diverse views at every stage of the pipeline, from production company to media agency to ad agency to client, and then it's much easier to address this and really look at it. So and to Kathryn's point, I think looking at the entire process and making sure that representation and inclusion is the way forward for the industry. We can't just have pockets or in one person in the room. Like, yeah, particularly, let's go back to the last question. One Bame person in the room, and make sure that's the voice. You know, they're the person that's responsible. You're the diversity. That's just not going to work. We really need to be looking at it at each and every stage. And I know some of the you know, there are some conversations happening, you know, broadcasters at every stage to make this happen. And that's what we need to be calling for and really calling out, because that's the only way it's going to change. I've been there and I've tried to do it, and I've been that lone voice, and it's bloody difficult. So, and I was the client paying the money. And I literally, when I said I had to shout, I mean shout. So actually, if we are addressing that pipeline at every stage, it will make these conversations more easier, more natural, and make action there. And I'm with Kathryn as well. Where people put the money is where the action. So there's a whole row, there's a whole thing in the charity sector as well, looking at this specific thing, because actually where you put the money, if you take away the money, it will force people to act. So, I mean, it sounds idealistic, and I'm a social change person, but I completely agree. I'm like, that's what we need to do.
Okay, guys, I think we're well and truly over our allotted time today. So I just wanted to start by saying, firstly, thanks to all our panelists. Thanks, Kathryn, Naren, Mihir, Colette and Sups. Absolutely awesome conversation. This panel is about bringing different people, different views, different perspectives. Not everyone will always agree, but what you'll get is authenticity and a view of, you know, we have a belief that the industry can be more inclusive. I want to say thank you for everybody who joined today. We had nearly 200 registrations. I think we can do better, team. Who do you know that should be on this, listening to this, that aren't? Send it to them, get them to register, spread the word. It's going to be next Tuesday at midday. We'll let everybody know what the topic is ASAP, Rocky on that. And as I said, if you're listening and you need support or help, or you want action, you know, go to our website and get in touch with a mentor. And if you've heard stuff today that, you know, you think, actually, I don't agree with that, well, engage with us. We're totally open. So thanks again. It's going to be a scorcher out there this week. So I hope you can enjoy some sun, and see you next week. Thanks, team. Cheers.